for the sake of being merciful, right? So God is also a just God. You know, He loves, and He, you know, if you are being taken advantage of, the call is not to be merciful in that spot of being taken advantage of, all right? So what we talked about is not about abusive relationships, for sure.
This is for you.
How do you decide what to tell the person how do you decide when to tell them to stop slurping, or do you just ignore it and forgive? Well, I think when I was in both those situations, I mean, I was young when I was growing up with my brother, so, I probably did, but I'm sure I said it in brotherly way, God, stop slurping that, or whatever. And my roommate, I don't think I was mature enough to say that in a way that would not have been, shaming or guilting or judgmental or whatever. So, but I do think that one of the questions that we may not get to tonight that we were going to have you reflect on is how can you make it easier for people to say sorry to you? Because it's one thing to want to say sorry, right, and feel like you want to be, that reactive mercy, right, where but some people are really hard to say sorry to because they just shame you or whatever, and so I think how we also say things can affect that sense of mercy. So I think sometimes you just gotta suck it up and forgive. But I think in intimate relationships, if you go back to those 5 pillars that I talked about, if there's a commitment there, then they're not going to walk out the door just because you challenge them. Hopefully, if you've had vulnerability before, I mean, saying something like that's certainly vulnerable. So it's not like it's the first time you've been vulnerable. So there's an expectation of that type of intimacy, right? It's harder when you don't know this person. And that's why it's so important in your relationships to be intentional about getting to know this person and discovering their humanity so that you can have conversations like that open up opportunities for mercy.
And this sort of leads us into the last section in this next question. It's how did we begin to bid with each other and as we started dating, and how has that evolved? So, I mean, when you were young 20-something, you were your age when you met, right? And so, we flirt with each other, me more so than him. Well, he wasn't a very good flirter, but...
I had no game. It was
Why is that in the past? I'm sorry.
That's for another time.
So bidding can be just kind of teasing each other, whatever, lighthearted. And as you become more vulnerable with each other, and you get to know each other, those bids can be, really good conversations, and meeting somebody there, or just listening to them, or exposing something about yourself that's very vulnerable. And that is a huge bid. Saying, look, let me tell you about something about me, and just laying it out there and having another person, hear you and still love you. That's a huge bid and a huge reception. And a bid like that is going to make a bigger leap than, just hey there, that's a smaller bid, right? So bids in a relationship might evolve. They might be, little things here and there to sort of get to know each other, and then they might be very significant bids towards vulnerability. And once you're married, I mean, I think that, it's hard. We have a lot of competing things for our attention, and so sometimes, it's a little bit harder to bid for each other or to respond to our bids because we're distracted by other things.
Yeah. So I think just to kind of close what we were in, then if there's any other questions, we'll take them. But it's interesting. We were talking about this when we prepared this a long time ago. That we noticed that you have a tendency to treat those you're closest to the worst, right? I mean, we say the meanest things to people we love the most. We take them for granted. And it's kind of why do we do that, right? Why do we treat those closest to us the worst? So why do we do that? And when we talked about this, we thought, well, probably part of it is because the trust, right? That pillar, the trust. We trust, if there's a level of trust, a healthy level of trust, there's kind of this sense that well, I can say this, they're not going to walk out the door. I mean, we don't maybe actively think that, but you kind of you're just ready, you can just lay yourself out, right? Because you're well, they're not going to walk out tomorrow. I mean, So we kind of just do that. Whereas like somebody you just met, you're less likely to do that because, they're going to be like, all right, see ya. Don't need to ever interact with you again. And so we're more cautious, right? We're more cautious. We're not as willing to put ourselves out there, what we're actually thinking. But I think, what if it looked differently? What if living mercifully meant making that look different? And what if the hurts in our relationship led to greater vulnerability rather than greater annoyance? What if each time we hurt someone, we turn that transaction into a deposit in the bank, emotional bank, rather than a withdrawal from the emotional bank account? This is just a little funny aside, like Felicity, who's standing right there. We've heard her, sometimes say to Michael, "You're draining my energy, Michael." And so what if, those times that we drain our energy, what if we could flip it on its head and turn that into a deposit? And so just a quick example of this, just to kind of close, how that can happen. So Emma and I play Ultimate Frisbee, most of you guys know that, and we were playing in a league last fall, and, you get competitive, etc., and we're on the same team, and we were out there, and whatever, Emma missed a throw to me or something. And I don't remember all the details, that's not important. But what's important is that my reaction to that was one of I was upset. I was like, whatever. I reacted really angry. It wasn't too blown out of proportion because we were on the field, but I kind of gave the dirty look, gave the what? Why did you, whatever, and definitely just whatever. I was not nice to her in that reaction, and. We kept playing, etc. End of the game, we didn't talk about that. It's kind of in the wind, it's gone, whatever. And later I started thinking, gosh, I wasn't very kind to Emma there. I kind of overreacted, and it's just a stupid Frisbee game. Why did I get all bent out of shape about that, right? Who cares? And I thought, gosh, maybe I should apologize. But then I was like, well, Emma hasn't really brought it up. She doesn't seem like it's affected her. So what's the point in kind of reopening the scab, right? So I'll just kind of let it, And so I kind of debated, should I apologize? Should I not apologize? If I do, am I just going to make things worse, etc. Well, later that day, or maybe it was the next day, I was doing some work up and I don't work a lot at home on our computer, but I was, and Emma, something happened and she just had a really kind of almost overreaction to me up there. Instead of being downstairs with them and the kids or something. And I got all defensive and everything, and I'm like, what, seriously, what's the deal? And what I realized from that situation was Emma's emotional bank account had some withdrawals in the last 24 hours. And there was something else, and I can't remember now off the top of my head, there was something else that happened during that time too. And I had this opportunity to take a withdrawal, which was the thing that happened at Frisbee, and turn it into a deposit by apologizing. Because if I had apologized to Emma, it would have led to this, potentially at first maybe hard conversation, but it would have led to a deeper vulnerability. Because it would have been I'm really sorry, Emma, I shouldn't have treated you that way. That was an overreaction. Can you forgive me? I'm really sorry. And likely that would have led to a space for her where she would have felt, one, noticed and appreciated, and two, out of that came kind of a sense of gratitude or connection with me. That oh my gosh, Troy did notice that way he did there. He wasn't just being an ass and didn't think about it, but he noticed that he hurt me, and he's apologizing.
Without being prompted.
Without being prompted, right? And I think that's what happened was that later Emma ended up prompting me, and she's like, well, and that got brought up, and it was well, then I apologize. Well, the apology is nice, but when it's being prompted, it's a little bit different. And so I had an opportunity to take that withdrawal and turn it into a deposit because the vulnerability that would have created. And I think that's what we can do with our relationships, right? When you screw up, you can still turn it into a deposit if we are willing to go there and be vulnerable with the person and kind of lay out gosh, this is my humanity. I screwed up. Can you love me in this? So, yeah. Were there other questions? Did you have yours? Did you write it down? Yeah. Any other thoughts? Anybody have any thoughts of mercy on their own experiences? All right. Thanks, guys, for coming tonight. I don't understand how it can get hotter when the sun goes down. Only in Missouri.